great person in our community who passed away in the last few days. Maury Maurer was the president of the National Bank of Indianapolis. A great man, a great leader of our community, a great philanthropic person. Just ask a moment of silence. His death was very sudden and very meaningful to me. Thank you. When struggling with identity or to accept yourself or quantifying your achievements with parameters set by someone else, the road to self-acceptance will only take you so far. At some point, you must stop and realize you are who you are. Then a poem from a book called Life in the Sloth Lane, which is on the same theme. If your eyes are blinded with your worries, you cannot see the beauty of the sunset. And lastly, have patience with all things, but chiefly have patience with yourself. So, thank you. Now, I think we're going to do the pledge. Does that, you want me to do that? I don't see it.
Flag's over here.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Greg.
Please be seated.
Please take your seats. We have a lot of anniversaries. Tom Dunham, 50 years ago, he joined the club. Former club board member Dave Young, 28 years. Dave Wright, 26 years. Mike Harping, 22. Lincoln Fellow T. Ray Phillips, 24. Bill Foley, 23. Chuck Cotterman, who's here with us, 18. Eric Steele, 13. Graham Honecker, 11. Chris Kaufman and Paul Neidig from IHSAA, 3 years. So congratulations to all of those people who continue to see the value of what we do here in serving children. Be on the lookout next week or so for the recording from the Abe Lincoln Awards program. It was absolutely wonderful if you missed it. You might have seen that Rafael Sanchez, who emceed the program, is moving from WRTV 6, and there was an article in the Indy Star that showed him at the Abe Lincoln presentations. So we're excited for him that he's staying in the community, and as far as I know, he's going to MC the program next year as well. At that program, we gave away $56,000. $20,000 to Ezra Hurt from Covenant Christian, $16,000 to Zoe Washington from Southport, Yosan Tuckle from Speedway, and Michael Helton from Decatur Central. On Friday, we'll be awarding the first ever scholarship to our girls basketball player. Thanks to the Kiwanis Foundation, we will provide a $1,000 scholarship to the 2024 Academic MVP presented by the Kiwanis Club for outstanding academic and athletic achievement for Marion County girls basketball. In the sprint line drill, the IHSAA and Indy Fever decided to plan lunch for the 49th annual girls basketball state finals at Gingrich Fieldhouse, modeling the boys event that's happened for 77 years, and we think it's long overdue and about time. And so we get to be part of that with this special award. So we'll be giving this award every year now because girls do have a place in our society, don't we though, ladies? Yeah, just say yes, dear, and do whatever we say and things will be fine. 5 Marion County players were nominated for the athletic directors, by their athletic directors. And we will be presenting the scholarship to Kayla Butts from Prairie Meridian. She's number 1 in her class with a 4.699 GPA on a 4-point scale, 5 AP courses, and all around an amazing young lady. Her nomination read, she sometimes gets yelled at during a game because instead of getting back on defense, she is checking on the opponent she just knocked down on a layup. Kayla will never bring attention to herself, and for that alone, she is the most deserving of any light we can shine on her, including this honor from Kiwanis. So next Thursday is Special Leap Day program, and it's going to be about the Holcomb Observatory Planetarium with Dr. Brian Murphy. And since we got the eclipse coming along, we hope everyone comes. Don't need to bring your special glasses for this one, but next month or in April you will. Zoom. That's Zoom. And then on March 7th, here at the Columbia Club will be Mel McMahon, Indiana Originals, and she is the Salvation Army on the radio for Radiothon. She'll be announcing the Golden Kettle competition with Rotary, so we can see who raised the most money for the Salvation Army this Christmas. And then on the 21st, at Zoom, we will hear from Howard Kellman in his 50th year of announcing baseball. During the transition phase to our website, as you know, Kiwanis is doing a whole new thing, and so please be patient with Kelly because she's about ready to pull her hair out. You'll be receiving an email listing registration links for upcoming programs. Stay tuned for initial versions of our new website early in March. At least it's tentatively early in March. You know how these things go. We had a great group at the social club. There were 9 people there. If you missed it, come to the next one. So we've been rotating throughout the city, different areas. So next month in March, we will try and have find a restaurant on the east side of town. Let's see. Lunch at Iozo's. March 26th. So we had our social supper this week. Usually on the third week of the month is Iozo's, but it's going to be next week instead on Monday. So if you are interested, please let Roger a text or an email and let him know you'll be attending so they can have enough food for everybody, which I don't think would ever be a problem at Iozo's. Roger, you want to give an update on the DLC's attendees? For anyone?
Laura's
Laura, you want to do
probably
that?
more in tune with that.
Okay, Laura, take it away, Laura.
See how it does.
Everyone, I just wanted to give you guys an update about our SLP programs. We have our district leadership conference coming up, not this weekend, but next. It's here in Indianapolis. It's an all-weekend event from Friday to Sunday. It's where, of course, they elect the new district leadership. We've already elected our divisional leadership, and we are all covered, at least in our area, with the lieutenant governor. And we'll be having students represented from Perry Meridian High School Key Club, Shortridge, and Speedway. We're crossing our fingers that that goes through in time for Speedway as well. So that's great. It's also this time of the year that we're electing our Key Club officers. And I can report for Perry Meridian, we have 12 applicants, which is great. There's 6 offices in Key Club. And at least in Perry Meridian, we just go ahead and make them co-offices. So all 12 will get a position if they accept it the way that they're voted into the office. So it should be exciting. That's happening after this meeting today. So I'll let you guys know next time I see you how it goes.
Great.
Yep.
So Laura or Graham, if you could share about giving money away, our grants, if you could share a
Yeah,
little bit for that?
I knew there was something else I had on my list. Not long ago, I got to give the grant check to Pack Away Hunger. It was really nice to meet the people that are responsible for their programming and the impact that they make in our community. They plan to use the grant to create meal kits for our community, and they'll partner with a local high school as well. I think it's Believe Indianapolis High School that they partner with, and should make a nice impact. And it was just really nice to see their place of work and you know, talk to them a little bit about how they run the organization. They bring their dogs to work, and I love that. So I got to pet their pets too. It was nice. I recommend it for anybody who wants to have a feel-good moment.
Yeah, Graham?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll be very brief because I know we've got to get on with the program. I delivered a check to Firefly Children's Services. The great thing is I didn't lose the check this year. You may recall, it's hard losing a check this big, but somehow I found a way. I would just say, I would just say it's another great reminder of the impact that we make in the community. But the great thing was being at the location itself. A lot of times we do it here, and I can tell you, they rolled out the red carpet for me when I came in. There were 5 members of their leadership team who greeted me, and the smiles on their faces to receive the check was really, gave me a great feeling. And a reminder to all of you, I reminded them, we would love to have somebody from Firefly in our club. So let's keep, we do this out of the spirit of our hearts, but not to say tit for tat, but we need members to keep growing what we're doing to keep aiding these organizations. But it gave me a very warm feeling doing it. So, Mary.
Thank you, Graham. So if you have not had an opportunity to present a $5,000 check to all these wonderful organizations, it really does, as Graham just said, it really does touch your heart and give you a feel-good moment of all the hard work we do for these organizations. I would like to bring Roger up to introduce our speaker, and then we'll have our program.
Thank you, Prez. I'd like to chip in on the grants. I delivered one to Claude McNeil Productions. They do shows around the city for children, normally of high school age. These are professional actors. It's a really neat thing they got. They're located on North Delaware. And if you get a chance, there's some programs coming up. I think there's one in April, mid-April, late April. I'll get the information to Kelly, and hopefully we can include that and possibly even get a group of us to go. He would give us some tickets, although they're only $10 a piece. So why I'm really up here is to introduce some folks. We've got a couple of guests I want to introduce. One of them is Lee Vriesman, I'm not sure, Vriesman. She's with IU. She's joining Dr. Richard Brandon-Friedman with us today. Elizabeth Iozo is my niece. She's here with my daughter, Katie Iozo. Katie Cummings. Katie Harris. Quit changing your name, honey. I won't be able to find you one of these days. Anyway, Richard Brandon-Friedman, PhD, LCSW, LCAC. You can tell us what those mean when you get up here. Is an assistant professor of social work in the Indiana University School of Social Work, and an associate professor of pediatrics, excuse me, in the IU School of Medicine, and a clinical social worker. Throughout his career, Dr. Brandon-Friedman has sought to better understand sexual identity development, sexual orientation identity, gender identity development, and sexual well-being. His current research and clinical work focus on the well-being of LGBTQ plus youth, with a particular focus on gender-diverse youth. Currently, he is leading a 3-year longitudinal evaluation, you didn't think I could say that word, did you? Of the impact of gender-affirming care on gender-diverse youth well-being. And I do want to say, the reason he's here is our other daughter, Dr. Teresa Imbergia, PhD, was going to be here. She's the one that introduced us. She's running one of his programs, as I understand. Came down with COVID this morning, so she wanted to come, but didn't. So, Dr. Brandon-Friedman, please join us, and thank you for being here. And welcome him. All yours. put that mic wherever you need it.
All righty. So the letters are licensed clinical social worker and licensed clinical addictions counselor are what they are. So I'm Richard Brandon-Friedman. You just heard about me. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm going to present on the research that Tracy is my project coordinator for. But the clicky thing's not working.
Things not clicking, so
The clicky thing's not clicking.
imagine that. Tell you guys don't want to have me around technology. It's not even funny.
Well, I know what the slides are, so I can.
There we go.
There we go.
Say I can start with what they are.
Do you need to see that?
I'll be okay, for the most part. I don't know exactly the order, so I may need to look at some point. But so the first question is, why is gender affirming care important? And so there's about 300,000 gender diverse youth is the number that you hear quoted. That when you look at Indiana, it's about 4,000 is what the Williams Institute says, which is a group out of UCLA. It's really hard to estimate how many youth identify as gender diverse. First, there's a lot of categories of gender diverse. Some people use the word transgender. Difficulty with the word transgender is it implies that you've transitioned across something. So if you think of trans, so it suggests that you had one gender identity or one sex and you transitioned to another one. So a lot of youth say, I didn't transition from anything. I always was this person. So a lot of youth now won't use the word transgender. I use gender diverse because it's all encompassing, but it encompasses youth that may identify as non-binary, which is someone who doesn't identify as either male or female. They sort of exist in a world where they just don't feel a specific gender. There's people who are gender fluid, which means they, alternate how the gender they feel. It's sort of like some days they feel more one way or more another. And so it's really hard to judge. You also have a question of what we're going to talk about, gender affirming care. And we can count the number of youth that receive gender affirming care, but not every youth wants to receive gender affirming care. And gender affirming care, as I'll talk about in a moment, is a very broad idea of what it is. So it's really hard to know, but those are the numbers. They're based on sort of population surveys. Again, with any population survey, it depends on how you ask the question. So if you ask the question, are you transgender, and the youth doesn't feel they've ever transitioned across a gender, they're going to say no. So a lot of times it'll say, do you identify as transgender, non-binary, or gender diverse in some way? And then you get higher numbers. Gender diverse youth have very high levels of depression, anxiety, all of those mental health components. Sometimes you hear that this must be related to them being gender diverse, and there's a suggestion that maybe being gender diverse leads to mental health concerns. And the answer is yes, in a way. What happens is, for many of these youth, it's not that they're gender diverse, it's the way they're treated because they're gender diverse. So there's a theory that we call minority stress, which is basically that they're constantly under stress because they're being bullied, harassed. People are questioning their identity, saying, "No, you've always been a boy. You really are a boy." And they're saying, "No, I've always been. I may have been assigned male at birth, but I identify as a girl, and I always have been." And so when you constantly hear that message, or you can't avoid the political climate right now around these, so that's really where some of the mental health concerns come in. We know the two biggest things to help youth are social and familial support, and then we have gender affirming care, which is what we're going to talk about here. Click. I will need to see some of this. Okay, so
Can I move that a little bit?
prepubertal youth.
We can go back more.
That's good enough, I can see now. Okay, prepubertal youth. So this is basically youth prior to puberty. For youth at that age, sometimes you hear like political discussions about that we're doing some sort of medical intervention on prepubertal youth. That's not true, that isn't what's done. At that age, basically it's all about social transition. It's about, what names and pronouns do you use? How do you present? How does your family refer to you? How do strangers refer to you? And that's really all that we're looking at that age. So if a youth at that age would come to a gender clinic, that's what they work on. How do you feel supported? How do you address these concerns in school? How do you help people to understand your gender? That's really all you're doing with youth at that age. Next.
It changed. Or no?
All right, pubertal youth. So you're looking at youth that are currently in puberty. So this is the age where you're still looking at the same components socially. Familial support, social support. At this age, things are getting a little bit more difficult generally socially. A lot of times when you're looking at younger youth, especially youth now, younger youth in this generation seem to really understand gender a little more. Like, okay, you say you're that's what you are. We all went through middle school and such. By the time you get to middle school, that's when it's a little more, we'll say, judgmental of peers. That's where you get more of the bullying and aspects like that. And it's also the time period that, if you think about puberty, that's when your body's changing. So if you're young, if you're prepubertal, other than your genitals, you look kind of the same, right? It's really based on, when you see a youth, you base it on what their haircut looks like or what, how they're presenting, right? But once you get to puberty, that's when you start having these changes, and that's when a lot of youth start to feel a lot of the dysphoria. So if you're assigned male at birth, then you're starting to, hair growth, your voice is starting to lower, and that's when they're saying, wow, this is really not me. Number one, it's not me, and it's changing how I can present. So at that point, you do all the same social supports. We do add in, this is when you would get possibly a medical intervention. So they're called puberty blockers. They've been used for years. Sometimes there's an understanding that these are brand new medications. They are not. These have been around for many, many years. And they were used before for precocious puberty, which are youth that start puberty too early. And so what they're used now for gender diverse youth is pretty much to pause puberty. It doesn't prevent puberty from ever occurring. It just pauses it for a while. And what that does is gives the youth some time to really explore their gender. It's really just helping them to say, okay, who are you and how do you understand yourself? Some youth, they'll present from 3 and say, this is who I am. Some youth, it takes longer for them to develop their understanding of themselves. And again, puberty is a time when it really starts to be very difficult for some youth. So it's pretty much a medical pause. If you're assigned male birth, they'll, suppress testosterone, and same, if you're assigned female at birth. And the goal is just to give them extra time. These are considered fully reversible medications, fully reversible interventions. If the youth is maybe assigned male at birth and they're deciding and they say, you know what, no, I definitely do identify as male, this is just, and I would like to present that way. You stop the puberty blockers, they go through regular puberty, the same as they would have, they're just, a couple years later. Same when you're looking at someone assigned female at birth, they're gonna go through the same process. Next. Well, next is post-pubertal youth, but under age 18. So if you're under age 18, this is where you're starting to possibly get into some of the gender affirming hormones. So if you were assigned male at birth, which when I say assigned male at birth, it basically means when you're born, the doctor holds you up, or now on an ultrasound, they go, yep, penis, definitely male. So that's why they say assigned male at birth, and the idea of assigned is you didn't pick it. So someone assigned it to you. You are male. not necessarily how you feel, but it's what was told to you. But once you're getting post-puberty, that's when you're looking at some of those gender-affirming hormones. So if you were assigned male at birth, at this point, you could be doing the testosterone suppression and taking an estrogen, some sort of estrogen. So that means that they're both stopping the male secondary sex characteristics and doing some of the female secondary sex characteristics. So in this case, you're going to look at, someone assigned male at birth will get, depending on their dosing and what they desire, you'll start to get some of the fat redistribution. They can get some breast growth. They're never going to have the huge amount, but they will start to get it, which is very helpful for some of them. When you're looking at someone assigned female at birth, once you start testosterone, you will get the hair growth, you will get, the voice will lower, you will start to build some of the muscle mass. So that's when you start to do this. Age depends on the clinic you go to. A lot of places, just in average, you're looking at youth about 15 and above is 15, 16 and above. Sometimes you hear, again, like people doing all these things early. It's really not occurring early. You can't do gender affirming hormones until someone's gone through puberty. You don't even start puberty blockers till someone's gone into puberty. Doctors call it Tanner 2, which is like you've started puberty, but you're not very far into it. So, because you do need, the body does need to go through a form of puberty at that. So, but that's all you're doing at this age. Now, there are questions as to whether these are, quote, reversible. The answer is they're partially reversible. So if you were to stop taking them, if you were assigned female at birth and stop taking testosterone, the muscle mass will drop down. You could get the fat redistribution again. You're not going to get, everything's not going to go away. Your vocal cords are not going to not be thick anymore. You've got, your hair growth will slow down, and it might not be as strong as if you had testosterone, but it's not going to go away. If you've taken estrogen, and you've had some of the breast budding, they're not going to, disappear. And that's one of the other important things with the puberty blockers is if you're assigned male at birth and, that hair growth is very difficult for you, if we stop the puberty, you don't get it. And so you won't have some of that difficulty that people have, when they transition and they say, wow, I still can't get rid of this hair. So that's where you're at. On the next slide, which is over 18 youth, that's when we're talking about surgeries. Surgeries are generally not performed on youth under 18. There are times that it's occurred in different places, but at those times when it's occurred, it generally is someone who has been, presenting this way from childhood, and this is who they are. In Indiana, we don't perform generally surgeries under 18. At this point, it's illegal to perform surgeries under 18. Surgeries vary as well. It depends on what the individual wants. A lot of youth don't want surgery. A lot of trans people don't want surgery. Some trans people don't want hormones. Some people want hormones for a little bit. So I have several friends who were assigned female at birth and identify more as non-binary. So they took testosterone for long enough that they got some of the hair growth, the voice lowering, and they stopped. They were like, this is about where I feel, this is how I identify, this looks like me, and I don't need to keep taking it. Some people go all the way through the surgery process. So, if you're assigned female at birth, this could be removing the breasts. If you're assigned male at birth, this could be breast implants. And then you have, which is considered top surgery, and then you have bottom surgery, which is when they're looking at vagioplasty or phalloplasty, which is, penis and vagina, and they will do various things that to make the body more how the individual identifies. The bottom surgeries are very complicated and relatively new to some degree, not new, but their new techniques are being developed, and a lot of individuals just don't feel that that's necessarily a part of it. Other people do. They say, I can't handle this at all. So sometimes when people talk about gender affirming care, they feel it's like we're taking young youth, a 12-year-old male, and we're completely transitioning their body to make them, a female with breasts and a what they would call a neo-vagina and such. That's not necessarily the case. Some, yeah, maybe, not at that time, certainly, when they're 18, 19, 20, maybe at that point. But some youth just, hey, I'm socially transitioned, that's good enough for me. That's all I need. So that's a background on sort of what gender affirming care is. On the next slide, you will see a nice little map of the United States. This is the kind of political component. You have these nice, you can see the colors.
Take your mic off the handstand if you want to.
Oh, good, I can like walk. No, I can't.
Yeah, it's hard to get off.
I can walk. Oh, beautiful. Okay, so here's Indiana. There we are. We do have restrictions on gender affirming care for minors, sort of at this point. They're blocked in the court. They were passed. There was a big debate about them last year. So you have the restrictions are the light blue, the darker middle blue are states that have no restriction. You know, you clearly have a coastal component to it, as well as, you know, you have, interestingly, Nebraska and Wyoming up there. The blue states are states that have gone a little bit further, and they have declared themselves sanctuary states. So there are some questions about gender affirming care across borders. And, you know, doctor licensure, you know, when you're a provider, your licensure is based on where the client is, not where you are. So, like my licensure, I can move to Florida and see clients in Indiana, but if they cross the border to Ohio, I can't see them. So there are questions about that. These are states that have said, we're not going to punish anyone, you know, as long as they're licensed, of course. You know, we are going to protect the care, gender affirming care. And then you have Missouri that has said, we're banning gender affirming care, not only for youth, but adults as well. So they've passed various provisions to ban it for even, you know, adults over 18, except for you have that little blue spot in Kansas City, which the city declared itself a sanctuary city. I don't know exactly how that works, since they are a sanctuary city, and if they're doing gender affirming care, they're technically against state law, but I don't know how they do it, but they have declared themselves a sanctuary city. You know, if you look at 5 years ago, this map would have been mostly, you know, the middle blue. There were no really discussion of this. It's been in the last 5 to 7 years that these restrictions have sort of exploded into existence, and that's been a big difficulty because, as I said, this gender affirming care is very critical for the youth. Now, in Indiana, we have this quirky provision where you can get mental health care. You know, as a mental health provider, I'm exempted from the ban on gender affirming care. But it's kind of, that's like a half benefit, you know? Like, if you've got a lot of problems with your body, that's me saying, okay, let me help you, get used to the body that you don't like. I mean, let me help you deal with it, although I will never be able to refer you to somewhere where you really can get something you like. So, moving next, I will talk about the research that we are actually doing. So our team is a multidisciplinary team. It's people from the School of Medicine. We have a psychologist from the School of Medicine. We have a medical doctor. We had 2 medical doctors, one left IU. We have a social worker in addition to me. We have a project coordinator named Tracy, who is absolutely wonderful, and has been coordinating this project from the very beginning. We have 2 doctoral students. Our research supports 2 students through their doctoral year, which means we support their health insurance, we support their stipend, and we support their tuition reimbursement and all of that. And then we have our youth advisors that advise us on these things, because I'm not transgender and I'm certainly not a youth anymore. So if I say, hey, this sounds like a great question, that's a great thing for me to decide. But if you're really going to do true work, you should ask the youth and say, hey, does this question even make sense to you? And they're like, no, Like, I don't know what you're trying to say, or I don't understand the words, because, you know, you're looking at 12-year-olds, or they say, I don't really get what you're even asking there. And I'm like, oh, well, obviously I'm asking this. And they're like, then why didn't you say that? You know, so that's why we have youth advisory boards. We have members of the gender diverse community that are also advise us. We have a couple people, one member of the gender diverse community now does all of our interviews with the youth. I feel very strongly about that. If I'm going to put someone to ask you about your gender experience, then they should be someone in the community. It shouldn't be Richard comes and starts asking you about all these intimate things about your life and how you understand gender, because I don't have that experience. So we do have individuals from the gender diverse community, and then we have community advisors, and then we of course have our statisticians and all those people who do the behind the scenes work. So as the title implied, we're looking at the impact of gender affirming care on gender diverse youth. So we are looking at various areas because there's all kinds of components. So we're looking at their psychological, mental health, depression, anxiety. We're looking at youth measures and adult measures. We're looking at all those things. We're looking at social well-being. We're looking at educational well-being. Like, do they feel supported in their school? Do they feel connected to their school? Do they feel safe in their environment, both in school, out of school? We're looking at where they are in their gender identity development. And so these youth are youth that started services at the Riley Clinic. And we started doing the interviews with them when they first started services. And then we've been following them, which on the next slide, it will say we follow them for 16 months is what we're doing right now. We have 54 youth that we're following, and 70 caregivers are part of that group. So obviously we have some youth that have both of their caregivers. They're doing scales, a lot of scales for us every 4 months. So they get on, they complete all these scales, these measures of depression and such, and our goal is to be able to measure it, how long they're going. Then we also have interviews that we're doing with them. How are things going? Are you doing, do you feel like you're making progress? How do you feel this care has changed your life? And we ask for the better or for the worse. We're not saying, our question isn't how has this improved your life? It's how has this changed your life? All right. I just covered that. So here are a couple of the findings. We have some youth that just finished their 12-month survey, and then we have some youth that have just begun their work. So this is one of the youth there we go. So this was a question of, how has this care impacted you? And so you can see the youth that says, it's gotten a lot better about how I feel about myself. It was such a source of distress. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror, shower with the lights off. Just couldn't look at myself, the anxiety, the despair, the grief. So this is, sometimes you hear those experiences, you hear them like in the press and you're like, yeah, do youth really feel that way? Yes. This youth was, very honest and said, I literally showered with the lights off because I couldn't stand looking at myself. I've worked with youth the same way. I've worked with youth that will wear a swimsuit in the shower because they don't want to see that part of their body, because that part of their body causes so much distress. And so next slide. I just have 2 slides from the youth. The way I feel about it, it's my self-esteem is gradually improving. It's definitely had a positive effect. This one said, again, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I couldn't look at pictures of myself because they felt disgusted. And that's not something unheard of. It's sort of like if you think about yourself, if you had, a part of your body that you really did not identify with, and it's just always there, and you can't get rid of it. It's always there. It's in the mirror. That's who you are. And so these youth are feeling that. Next one. You do hear a lot about suicidality. Some people say it's overblown, that people say there's too many youth that are, they're emphasizing it too much. I see it all the time. We have youth with high suicidality, not necessarily, high suicide ideation. And it's really that sense of despair, like I'm never going to be, who I want to be or who I see. this one is a parent. The goal is for them to be happy, and it's made a good progress all around. Now, these are all first interviews, so these have all been done within about 3 to 4 months of them starting care. So they're seeing this already. And even if they are taking puberty blocker or hormones, they're probably not seeing much of an effect at this point but even knowing they have the care is making this difference. And last slide of these. So this is a youth. This is this one was really powerful for me, and I really wanted to look up the video, but I didn't, because I don't know who the youth is. We keep it, we keep it confidential. But they announced on TikTok that she's a woman. It's very powerful. I shared it with my friends, and they were all about, she's become so much of who she is. Like people will say, they just come out of their shell. So that's a little bit of what we've done. I don't have any of the quantitative stuff up here because I figured you didn't want to look at a bunch of statistical numbers and things like that. On I think my last slide, go past that one. Oh, that's the other way.
17, 18, 19.
Oh. Well, the last slide that is where we're at now. So our goal is to finish the 16 months. Lee's going to talk a little bit about where we are with that. My ideal goal, if the world worked exactly how I would love 24 months of data with all of these youth. Following them for 2 years would be amazing. Research is expensive. You saw everything that we're supporting. So that's where we're at. We are doing decent enough to finish through this year, but there's a heavy cost to some of this research. We also pay the participants. I didn't mention that. All these participants, every time they do these things, they're getting $25 for their scales and $25 for their interviews. It's not right for me to make my career publishing research and saying, look at all this, and then the youth are like, okay, you told my story, what did I do? So that is actually a high level of cost when you think of every 4 months we're paying out $50 to each one of these participants. So that's where I'm at, and I think Lee will talk next and give you an update on where we are with school medicine.
Thank you, Richard. I'm always amazed at what they're doing in this small research study, and one of the things that I've learned, I should introduce myself first. I'm Lee Vriesman. I'm a Senior Director of Development for the IU School of Medicine. And so Richard and I have been working together for about 3 years now, trying to find funding for his research. And you probably hear about the NIH funding that a lot of schools like IU get. And those are fabulous. Those are huge grants that people work really hard on. But the small projects like this, the groundbreaking, really early research is very expensive and difficult to get off the ground without funding, without private funding. So that's what we've been working on. But before I get into that, I just wanted to give you, you probably don't ever get to know much about the IU School of Medicine, which is right here in your backyard. So I thought I'd give you just a few data points. So IU is the largest school of medicine in the country. We have in each class about 300 students. And this year, actually just a few days ago, we received word that in the Blue Ridge Institute for Medical Research, they rank all of the schools based on their NIH funding. And so this year we have received over $243 million in total funding from the NIH, and that's a $54 million increase over the past 5 years, or 28% increase, which is incredible. It also puts us at number 13th in the NIH funding for all public medical schools in the country. So I think we're very proud about that, of course. Another thing that is really impressive about IU is that our Alzheimer's disease research was internationally what's my word here? Recognized. Thank you. And that was in last fall. We had 150 presentations at the International Alzheimer's Disease Association conference, and one in particular was awarded the most impactful study published in Alzheimer's research, and that is developing a new therapy that would target proteins and potentially stop the tau tangles forming in the brain. And if you know anything about Alzheimer's disease, you know that proteins and tangles happen in the brain. This is incredible. That I'm always amazed at how I think the School of Medicine is kind of humble and doesn't really send out this information much. So we don't know about it, and I think our community should know what we have right here. We are also a clinical trial site for 3 Alzheimer's disease drug treatments, and that's completely amazing that patients and caregivers in our state have access to clinical trials that you would not have in other places. And the third thing I just wanted to mention is that I'm sure you've all seen the construction at
Haven't noticed it.
haven't noticed it, at 16th and Senate, because you can't get anywhere, can you? Yes. Well, part of that is IU Health building a new hospital, but the other part of it is the IU School of Medicine building a new medical education and research building. Now, the School of Medicine hasn't had any kind of new building since 1961. 59 to 61, I think, was when the last time. So we can go way back in our alumni, and they're like, you mean you're still meeting in those buildings? So we're excited about this. The first 3 floors will feature, new, modern, flexible classrooms. It's amazing what they do now with simulation centers for clinical and for surgery. We'll have virtual reality, portable ultrasound, and just all the tools to make better doctors. And then we also will have 8 floors of research space, because our research grants have more than doubled in the last decade, but our lab space has not. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can go on our website, but you can also contact me, and we have a virtual tour, which is really fun to see, and you can see kind of what it's going to look like. So on your table, when we go back to Richard's presentation, which is such important research, you have a piece of paper that has my information. It also has a link to the website if anyone wants to make a gift or send it to someone else who you think would be interested. Also, there's a QR code if you want to just do that. I just want to thank you personally for all that you do for the community. I've worked in different fundraising jobs most of my career, and one of the lengthiest times I had was at Firefly, what we called the Children's Bureau, when I was there. And it is a wonderful organization. It helps children, and I had a great time there. I spent more than 10 years of my career there. So I just thank you as a group for all that you do, and I really appreciate the chance to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Supplemental to me? Questions?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah. Any questions for our?
I had a question for Lee. I wanted to ask Lee, are you doing work with Lily? A lot of relationship with Lily as
Yes,
with the research?
absolutely. We work very closely
I
with
noticed the
Lily.
stock was up. Maybe they have extra money for you.
Wouldn't
They
that
have
be
to
nice?
disperse some of that money.
Yes,
You know that.
many different areas of
Could
the
you answer
school.
that at the mic?
Oh, I'm
Because
sorry.
we've got this on our
Both of them
Facebook
go on
page.
there.
Oh,
I'll
oh,
go
oh,
there.
okay. Yeah.
Many different areas of the school work with Eli Lilly and Lilly Research. They do a huge, they make very large donations of products to our global health program over in Africa. And also they do a lot of things with us on the Alzheimer's side. And I know that there is a whole bunch more that I don't know about, but yes, we do work with Lilly.
I think with my research, we have difficulties because with a lot of the, pharmaceutical companies, they're, being very nice, but they also want to look at some of their medications, right? And so, testosterone we've been doing for, probably centuries, and estrogen and such, so it's all generic. And a lot of those places, as Lee was saying, want to fund big scale things. So they want you to say, I'm going to track, 500 youth. Well, you can't start with 500 youth, you start with 50 youth, and so that's where we struggle a little bit. Yes.
Seems to me where it says gender affirming, that they really mean gender switching. Why are you affirming your gender when you're switching?
Well, as the youth would say, youth or people who are gender diverse would say that it's not really switching their gender because that's who they always were. So it's a process of perhaps switching the way others interpreted or how the sex that they were assigned. If someone said they were male, it's more of a sense of affirming who they feel they are. And yes, for a lot of them, that is a transition or as such of a switch from how people interpreted them before. But a lot of the individuals would say, that's not who I was. That's who you said I was. That's how you decided to refer to me, but it was never me in the first place.
So you're ignoring an XX and an XY, is that right?
We are looking at X and XY are biological constructs, which are, those are sex hormones. And so, and there's also, all the variations in terms of XXX and all of those. And so those are sex, and those also constitute genitalia. So that's what sex is biologically. But gender is a social construct. So if I say, how do you feel about yourself? You could say male, female, neither. And even if you look at how gender has been presented over time, you look back, one of my favorite pictures is it's Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he's in this cute little white dress sitting on a horse. Because that was, for wealthy people, that's what they did at that point. And you look at pink. Now everyone says pink is a girl's color. In the early 1900s, pink was considered the most masculine color. So these are senses of gender, who wears what and how you should be. It's okay, you have a penis, therefore you should like trucks, you should like this. Whereas people are saying, why? Maybe that's my sex. Yes, I can perhaps agree that that's my sex, but that's not who I am as a social construct of my gender, which is why we call it gender affirming, because it's affirming the gender that they feel. Yes.
So with ADHD medications, you give them the medication and it helps them, but it also stunts their growth. When you pause puberty with medications, are there any untoward risks or long-term results that these people have to live with?
There are some medical questions that come up depending on where they're at in puberty. That's partially why they wait till they're into puberty. Okay. In terms of long-term necessarily impacts in terms of medical conditions. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a social work doctor. So I don't deal with some of those things. If you go to the Riley Gender Health webpage, they have a lot of information on that. There are a lot of places out there that have more specifics on what various hormones do, but I don't actually do that part.
Richard, how do you educate parents and relatives about this issue? I was recently driving somewhere in southern Indiana. I don't think they know anything about what you're talking about. So how do you get your message out about this issue, a medical issue or psychological issue in Indiana to help people in the legislature understand what in the world you're doing?
I testified at the legislature. I did testify there to try and explain some of what we do. I think part of it goes back to the thought that we're taking, early youth, young youth, and giving them surgeries and changing their bodies permanently. And that's sort of the conception people have, where it's really not that. Gender affirming care is everything I talked about. And for some youth, yes, some youth at some point in their future, that's what they want. With parents, a lot of what we start with is what is the difference between what you thought and what your kid thought? So a lot of parents, when you break it down, sometimes it's like, it's a loss of what they thought or projected. So if they had a girl signed female at birth, it's real, it's just real, you go, well, we're gonna have the cute little wedding and she's gonna wear the white dress and, we're gonna have all the bridesmaids up there. And that's all your projection. That's all you saying, this is what their body has and this is what it's gonna be. And so, but then you help the parents understand that that's you, not them. And a lot of parents, once you work with them and they start to understand components of gender, then they start to realize, it's not who the youth is. Like their body is not who they are. And a lot of it is education, talking with parents. We do some really interesting exercises of having parents look at how they identify with gender and then looking at their gender beliefs and saying, who taught you that trucks were this? Who taught you that? And then they start to look at it and say, okay, this really is sort of a construct. And some parents, you will not get there, admittedly. Some parents will not get there. You do have a very high level of homelessness with especially gender diverse youth. I've worked with youth that were in the foster care system. It's not like it's this existential thing. It happens. I've worked with youth that have been kicked out of their home because they were transgender. So that is something that's real, but we generally find that if parents start to understand and really look at it, then they can get there. And a lot of parents, they care about their kids. They love their kids. And sometimes you help them see that, part of caring about your kids is affirming who they are. Just like, it's obviously a little bit more difficult, but if you projected your child was going to be a doctor and they come and say, hey, I'm really into, let's see, I'm really into car racing. And you're like, I pictured you as this beautiful female doctor changing the world. And they're like, no, I'd rather be a race car driver. And you're like, it's parents helping them to understand that, that was your projection. And you can affirm your child and you can love them just as much if they're presenting female, male, if they want to use she pronouns, he pronouns. I mean, pronouns are pronouns. Names are names. Just because I called you Richard, if you say Richard doesn't fit me, it's Rachel. Okay, call me Rachel. Is it really this huge thing to call them a different name? And so we help parents get to that point is really what we do.
Is it part of our American culture, the way we approach these people and look at them and talk about them, even after post-18, will that change, you think, in your mind over the generations, that those people are more accepted the way they are, without the strange looks and the discussions?
I think yes, the younger generation is coming very differently. Like my son, obviously he's more involved in this world, but I had a friend who, I had a very close friend who started using they, them pronouns. And my son was like, oh, okay. And just like, a couple times made a mistake, but just like jumped right into it. You see people like, again, with my son, like some people are like, oh, he's got two dads. The kids in his class, they were just like, okay, Edwin's got two dads. There he is, two dads, and they didn't think anything of it. I think, especially if you look at, Missouri, there's a lot of stigma that the politicians are putting out there to some degree. I mean, they're saying, even as an adult, you can't make that decision. So I think, yes, things are getting better. I think youth are much more comfortable with these things, whereas people that are a little older may not have really even thought about these things, whereas youth are just like, okay, whatever, that's how it is.
Well, as Greg mentioned, I think the education, both to the children and the adults, is a big help. So.
You know, it's interesting when you talk about education. It's also the same for some of the youth. You know, there is this idea that, you know, all these youth just suddenly come out due to social media and such. You know, it's like a trendy thing to do. Well, first of all, I work with a lot of these youth. It's not normally a positive thing. If you grew up as a, you know, transgender person through middle school and such, people aren't really celebrating you for the most part. You know, you're pretty negative. But some of it is just learning the language. We all have to learn the language. I mean, sometimes people say, I knew how I felt. I always felt this way, but I didn't know there was a word. I got on and saw that this is a word, and I learned. And then I could say, this is how I identify. If you don't know a word, you can't identify it.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
See you. Stay up there.
So you may know that we have given money to the Indiana Youth Group, who helps people like this in transition from our foundation. So thank you very much to both of you. We're going to give a donation in your honor to 100 cameras for 100 kids. Their mission is to provide 100 deserving kids with cameras each year, fostering creativity and self-expression and development of important life skills. Through the lens of cameras, they can tell their stories, document their journeys, and explore the world around them in an entirely new way. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so next week, thank you. Next week, Thursday, is a Zoom for our Leap Day, and it will be the Holcomb Observatory. And now, last but not least, dad joke, puns, etc. This one is out of date, but I remember my dad saying it when we were kids. Why are hurricanes only named for girls? It's because you've never heard of a hurricane. And with that, we are adjourned.